When you read through the Bible, there's this mysterious figure that keeps popping up. He's got a few different names, but the description of who he is, it's weirdly consistent. So today, we're going to trace the profile of this guy by connecting prophecies that were written hundreds of years apart. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Have you ever had that feeling, that sinking feeling in your stomach, where you think you've missed something huge? I mean, it's a totally human thing to feel, right? Well, believe it or not, that's exactly what an entire church in the ancient city of Thessalonica was going through. They were absolutely terrified that they had somehow missed the second coming of Christ.
So to deal with all this panic, the Apostle Paul, one of the key leaders in the early church, he writes them a letter. And he doesn't just pat them on the back and say, hey, don't worry about it. No, he does something much more powerful. He calms their fears by reminding them of a very specific prophecy, basically a checklist of events that had to happen first.
And he even says this right here in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 5. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? I mean, you could almost hear the tone in his voice, right? He's basically saying, guys, come on, we talked about this. And that little phrase is a huge clue. It tells us he'd already taught them about this final, lawless ruler, and that this whole prophecy wasn't something he just made up. Nope. Its roots go way, way back to the Old Testament. Okay, so where do those roots lead? They lead us straight to the book of Daniel. We're talking centuries before Paul was even on the scene. The prophet Daniel is the one who gives us the original blueprint, the very first profile of this character. He lays out the foundational traits we need to be looking for. So Daniel's name for this figure, back in chapter 7, is the little horn. It sounds a little strange, right? But the name is packed with meaning. It points to his political nature. He's a power that seems to come out of nowhere, maybe looks small at first, but is just dripping with arrogance and rises to take over the world stage.
Okay, so fast forward a few hundred years. Paul, writing to those worried Thessalonians, calls him the Man of Lawlessness. This name gets right to the heart of his character. I mean, his number one defining trait is just a complete, total rebellion against God, his law, his authority, everything. And then we get to the book of Revelation. The Apostle John gives us a third name, the beast from the sea. Wow. This one is all about the massive scale of his power. We're talking a figure who achieves total global domination. So think about it. The little horn, the man of lawlessness, the beast from the sea. 3 different names from 3 different authors over a huge span of time. But, and this is the crucial part, they are all describing the exact same person. All right, so how can we be so sure? How do we know for a fact that Paul is talking about the same guy from Daniel's prophecies? Well, it's because he doesn't just invent some new villain out of thin air. He very deliberately builds on the foundation Daniel laid, and he uses language that his original readers would have recognized in a heartbeat. Listen to how Paul describes this guy's ultimate move. It's the peak of arrogance. It says he, quotes, exalts himself above every so-called god or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. I mean, this guy doesn't just fight against God. He literally tries to replace God. He walks into God's temple and declares, I'm God now. But listen closely to the words he uses, because that's the key. Check this out. When you put them side by side, it's not just a coincidence. On the left, Daniel 11:36 says the king will exalt and magnify himself above every god. On the right, Paul says he exalts himself above every so-called god. That's a direct echo. Paul is practically quoting Daniel. He's sending a massive signal to the Thessalonians, saying, hey, remember that guy Daniel talked about? Yeah, this is him. And believe me, that one verse comparison, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The connections go so much deeper. When you actually take the time to lay out all the descriptions from Daniel, from Paul, and then from John in Revelation, what you get is this incredibly detailed and shockingly consistent profile. So let's just look at the evidence. Self-exaltation? Check. All 3 books nail that one. How about being empowered by Satan? Yep, that's in there too. Daniel says his power is not his own, which is a bit mysterious, but then Revelation just comes right out and says the dragon, Satan, gives the beast his authority. And here's the kicker. All 3 of these accounts end the exact same way, with his final destruction. He's taken out by God himself. That kind of consistency across hundreds of years, that's what makes this so compelling.
So when you boil it all down, what do you get? You get a crystal clear picture of this person. We're talking about someone defined by insane, arrogant self-exaltation, someone who constantly blasphemes God. He uses deception and supernatural signs to fool people, he persecutes believers, and his story always ends with his eventual destruction by Christ. That's the core profile, consistent across the board. Okay, so let's think of it this way. Daniel gave us the blueprint. Paul came along and confirmed, yep, this is the guy from the blueprint. So what does Revelation do? Revelation takes that blueprint and builds the thing on a global scale. It takes this character and puts him on the world stage. Daniel might have hinted at a worldwide reach, but Revelation, it just spells it out. Revelation chapter 13, verse 7 says, quote, "Authority was given him over every tribe and people and tongue and nation." I mean, there's just no ambiguity there, is there? His authority is absolute, and it's global. And if you need even more proof that they're talking about the same thing, look at the timeline. Daniel 7 says his reign lasts for a time, times, and half a time. A bit cryptic, right? But then Revelation 13 says his authority lasts for 42 months. Well, guess what? 42 months is 3.5 years. A time, times, and half a time is ancient prophetic language for, you guessed it, 3.5 years. It's the exact same time period.
So you can see how this all fits together, right? It's like each prophet is adding another piece to the puzzle. Daniel gives us the basic profile, who this guy is. Then Paul comes along and gives us the timing, when he'll show up. And finally, John in Revelation shows us the full impact, what his global rule and his final judgment will actually look like. Each one builds on the last to give us one complete, cohesive story. And all of this brings us full circle, right back to where we started. Remember that super anxious church in Thessalonica? It's so important to remember why Paul was writing to them. His goal wasn't to get them all hyped up trying to predict the future. Not at all. His goal was pastoral. It was all about reassurance. I mean, his whole point boiled down to really simple logic. He was basically telling them, look, you can't be at the end of the play if the main villain hasn't even made his entrance yet. Something else, a really big, obvious something, had to happen first.
And this is the verse that was supposed to bring them all some peace. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. Paul lays it out so clearly. That day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed. That word unless is everything. It's a clear, unmissable condition that has to be met. So the logic for them was super simple, and it was meant to be calming. Point 1, the man of lawlessness hadn't shown up. Point 2, in fact, Paul says something was actually holding him back, a restrainer. So point 3, the conclusion was obvious. They hadn't missed the boat. They hadn't been left behind. They were okay.
So it's clear that Paul used this incredibly detailed prophecy to bring comfort and clarity to a really scared group of people, which leaves us with a pretty important question, doesn't it? If the goal back then was reassurance, what's the point of this prophetic profile for us right here, right now,